Welcome to WTF Media. If you love crazy, unbelievable stories, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out. Let's jump right into today's story. What? I said, snapping my head around to look at my wife Carol. What did you just say? I asked, not believing what I thought I had just heard. Dan, I know you're going to be mad, but I'm not happy right now, and I'm thinking of us getting a trial separation. So I can get my head together and figure out what I want, Carol told me as I stood on the deck cooking steaks on the grill. My friend Karin has a spare room, and she said I could stay with her for the time being. When were you going to tell me, Carol? Or were you just going to leave me a note on my pillow tonight? I said a little louder than he probably should have. Don't raise your voice, Dan. I don't want Andy to hear what we're talking about. Andy being our 6-year-old son. I knew you'd react this way. That's why I didn't want to bring it up until tonight. So in other words, you've already made up your mind to leave. Are you going to tell Andy, or are you going to leave it to me after you're gone? I said in a sarcastic tone. I'll tell him myself tonight before bed, she replied. This isn't permanent, you know. Yeah, right. You're moving in with that tramp Karin. I guess I should have seen it coming, I told her, getting more angry by the minute. I'll draft up the paperwork tomorrow. You can sign it, and I'll get it filed with the court by Wednesday, Carol. What paperwork? Was her reply. Well, if you're going to leave, I want it to be a legal separation. That way, when you don't come back, it will automatically turn into a divorce decree. This way, we won't have to go through all the hassle twice, I told her. I don't want a divorce, Dan. Only a little time to myself to sort out a few things. That's all, honey, Carol replied. Bullshit, Carol, I spat back at her. I've asked you to talk to me for the last 4 months, but you've been too busy with Karin and your new friends to make the time. Now you want to move in with your new buddy Karin, so you can do what you have probably wanted to do for the last 6 months, I now yelled. But you're not going to do it with my blessings, and I'm certainly not going to stand by and become a cuckold by you or anyone else, I said, slamming the top down on the grill. This was not going the way Carol had anticipated. She knew Dan was going to be angry, but she thought she could convince him that this would be a growing experience for the both of them. But now it had blown up in her face. Dan, please, was all Carol could get out before he stormed off in a huff, leaving her to tend the grill. Taking the steaks off the grill and putting them on the counter, she went looking for him. She found Dan upstairs, in their bedroom. He was in the process of literally throwing all her clothes and everything else of hers into the spare bedroom. Take your shit and move the hell out. I don't care anymore, I screamed at her. I'll send the paperwork to your office. Sign it and get it back, Keith, the lawyer Dan had been using for the past 6 years. Don't worry. I'll take Andy out to dinner so he doesn't have to watch his mother abandon him, I said, grabbing my coat and son before heading out to my car. Karin, this is Carol, she started. Dan didn't take it well, not well at all, and is threatening me with divorce, Carol said, starting to get more than a little teary-eyed. I told you he wasn't going to be happy, but he'll come around soon, so don't worry, Karin told her over the phone. Hell, in a couple of weeks, he'll be begging you to come back, and then you will have him right where you want him. I hope you're right, Karin, because right now he's ready to chuck me out the door and start divorce paperwork, she said hesitantly. I need some time away, but I don't want to end my marriage either, Carol told her. I'll be right over and help you with your stuff, Karin told her. The sooner you are on your own and away from him, the sooner you can figure out what you really want. With that said, Karin drove over and helped Carol pack up the majority of her stuff and was out of the house before Dan and Andy got back. I had seen this coming for quite a while. Carol and I were both accountants and had met 8 years ago while we were both auditing a company that had gone Chapter 7. Each one of us were representing a different bank which had a monetary stake in the failed company. We worked together and ended up having lunch and dinner with each other almost every night. It took us a full week to complete the audit, and by then we found that we really liked each other. Carol was about 5 foot 6 inches with brown hair and about 175 pounds. She had a beautiful face, but was a little chunky. Dan was about 5 foot 8 inches tall, about 195, and at 22 already had a spare tire around his middle. From eating out every day, these two geeks were made for each other. We were married 4 months later, and Carol found herself pregnant 8 months after that. Carol had a tough pregnancy and was bedridden the last 5 months, and such gained a ton of weight. By the time she gave birth to Andy, she'd ballooned to almost 250 pounds. I, however, never said a word. I loved her no matter what her weight was. We were a happy family until Carol heard 2 of her co-workers talking about her. "She's such a good-looking woman," one girl said to the other. "Too bad she's as big as a house. I wonder if she has her clothes custom-made at Omar the tent-maker dress shop," she said, laughing out loud. They may have thought it was funny, but Carol didn't. Carol was crying in the bathroom when Karin walked in. "You all right, Carol?" she asked. "Everyone thinks I'm a fat pig," she said, crying. "If they only knew how hard it was for me to lose weight, they wouldn't be so mean," she sobbed. "Girl, look. All you need is to be put on a good diet and enroll at a gym," Karin told her. "You are a beautiful girl, hiding underneath all that flab. That's all. You just need to make your mind up and do it, and that's what Carol did." I did the books for a local gym and got us a great membership deal, so we joined the following week. The gym had an in-house nursery, so we were able to bring Andy with us after work when we both went. Carol was a woman possessed and worked out 6 days a week, while I could only fit in maybe 3 nights per week. When the pounds didn't just fall off, Carol went to a doctor and got a prescription for diet pills. I wasn't happy about it, but Carol was on a mission to lose weight. 8 months later, Carol was a slim 125 pounds and looked fantastic. She bought a whole new wardrobe, and everyone, including the men at her work, said she looked great. That's when the trouble started. We were at Carol's company Christmas party when the shit hit the fan. Carol wore a dress that was more than a little revealing and was being hit on all night by her male co-workers. She was in 7th heaven with all the attention she was receiving. When a bunch of guys caught her under the mistletoe, she must have kissed a dozen before I came over and put a stop to it. Carol had probably had 1 too many drinks and never realized the guys' hands were all over her while they grabbed a kiss. I took Carol by the arm and told her it was time for us to leave. Now, she didn't want to go just yet and made a bit of a scene. "Carol, I'm leaving right now, with or without you," I finally told her. She relented, but I could tell she was pissed. On the way home, we had a huge fight. "Carol, you were acting like some kind of cheap tramp tonight. I, along with everyone else, watched those guys put their hands all over your body, and you did nothing to stop them," I yelled. "It was just a little innocent fun, that's all. No big deal," she replied. "Not from where I stood," I told her. "How would you like it if I was all over some girl, kissing and grabbing at her?" I asked, but I knew she was too drunk to listen to reason at that point. Carol got sick that night. Luckily, she had removed her new dress before she tossed her cookies. She looked like hell the next morning and apologized to me, saying it would never happen again. But it did. It's just that I wasn't around the next time. Carol started stopping after work, on Wednesdays, for a girls' night out. There were 7 girls, some married and others not, who would stop for a drink or two at Tony's after work. It started off that she'd be home by 6:30, but soon it stretched to 7:30 and finally to almost 9 p.m. By the time Carol got home, Andy was in bed and I was not in the best of moods. When they first got married, we had screwed like teenagers and couldn't get enough of each other. Now it seemed, if we did it once a week, that was a lot. One thing for certain, when Carol came home on Wednesday nights, she was hot to trot, and tonight was no exception. Neither one of us had what you would call a lot of sexual experience when we first got married, and were a little apprehensive to try any new things from the get-go. We learned from each other what each one of us liked, and through a few X-rated moves, we added a lot things to our repertoire. Now, however, every week when Carol got home, she seemed to want to try something new and exciting, most of which I wondered where she'd gotten the idea. When we got married, Carol couldn't give a blowjob worth a shit. But then, even a bad blowjob was better than no blowjob at all. Tonight, she came out of the bathroom totally naked and asked, "Where is my stud muffin?" She'd had more than a few drinks and was later than normal, but she knew how to get me into a good mood. She climbed up from the foot of the bed, between my legs, pulled my boxers off, and proceeded to give me the best blowjob she could. I'm just over 6 inches, so Carol had no trouble deep-throating me. Carol likes it when I trim my pubic hairs, because she said the hairs tickle her nose, especially when she deep-throated me. She's learned to use just enough spit and hand action to get me to rock hard, but still refuses to let me shoot into her mouth. But maybe one day she reconsider, I thought to myself. She was already dripping when I rolled her over and started going down on her, before she stopped me. "Just take me tonight on. I just need to feel you inside of me," she said. I did the best I could, not wanting to shoot off too early. I thought about my mom, my new audit proposal. Anything, so I would last a couple of minutes longer before dropping my load. Carol seemed to enjoy it, as she screamed like I was killing her. I finished up doing her from behind and shot my hot load into her pussy as Carol slumped onto the bed. "God damn, I needed that," she told me. "But I think I'm going to be sore for a week," she said with a laugh, rolling onto her back. I crept up, kissed her, and told her how happy I was being married to her. Well, that is the way it used to be until this week. After dinner, Andy and I came home to an empty house. That bitch Karin, I thought to myself. Ever since Carol lost that weight, Karin's been on her to do this or that with her. No wonder her husband left her. She was nothing but a tramp and is now turning my wife into one also. I got Andy ready for bed, tucked him in, and read him a story. When he asked about his mother, I just told him that Mommy was visiting and would be home in a couple of days, but I didn't believe it for a minute. I went downstairs, called my mom, and brought her up to speed. "Mom, can you watch Andy during the day until I can find someone permanent?" I asked. "Honey, Carol will come to her senses and be back by the end of the week. You know her. She can't be away from Andy more than a few hours before she goes nuts," Mom told me. "But I'll be over before you go to work and watch him." I hoped she was right, but I wasn't as sure as my mom. On Monday, I contacted Keith and told him that Carol had left me. "I want to make sure I'm totally protected, including having permanent custody of Andy. I want it written up and spelled out in no uncertain terms that if either one of us acts in a way a married spouse shouldn't, the other gets a 65-35 split of the assets. I think she is looking to cheat on me. And I want to be covered," I told Keith. "I wanted to have a 60-day expiration date, after which it becomes a divorce decree. And can you get it done by tomorrow?" I asked. "Aren't you jumping the gun a little, Dan? She just left, and you're ready to write up divorce papers?" he asked me. "Carol has been planning this for a while, and maybe this will bring her around. But if not, I don't want to lose everything I've worked for just because she wants to try a new guy," I told him. "All right, Dan. I'll get it done today and have her served at work tomorrow. Anything else?" "Not that I can think of. I just need to draw a line in the sand so she understands what she stands to lose, that's all. Also, Keith, I will need 2 other agreements made up, but we've got a little time on those. I'll fax you what I want later in the week." When Carol got to work Tuesday, she was a little bummed. This was the longest she'd been away from Andy and Dan in the last 8 years. Coming back from lunch, she was told a man was waiting in her office. "Carol Spencer?" he asked. "Yes, I'm Carol. What can I do for you?" she replied. "You have been served," he said, handing her a manila envelope. Carol spent the next half an hour going over all the conditions and property divisions outlined in the separation decree. Although it read more like actual divorce paperwork, it stated that Dan would have temporary, but full custody of Andy, but Carol would be allowed visitation, with reasonable notice. By the time she was done reading it, she was more hurt than angry. "I've been gone for 2 days, and Dan's already written off our marriage," she said to herself. She tried to reach Dan, but his secretary said he was out for the day, and his cell went right to voicemail. Dan was at this moment at home changing the locks, taking care of splitting their finances, and taking Carol's name off his insurance and 401k. By 4 o'clock, I was done with all my business and turned on my cell phone. "Shit," I said to myself. 12 messages from Carol. I deleted them all. I had dinner with Andy at my mother's house and told her what I'd done. Carol's going to be mad as hell. Dan, I would be if I was in her shoes. "How far do you intend to take it?" she asked. "All the way, Mom," I replied. "I can't fix this marriage by myself, especially since she won't listen to reason, so I've upped the stakes. She started this mess, but by God, I'll finish it if I find out she has been cheating on me. I used to trust her, but right now I wouldn't believe a word that comes out of her mouth. So, right now, I'm protecting my son and myself. If we do get back together, great. If not, I'll hold all the cards." "Son, I've never seen this side of you. Remind me never to get on your bad side," my mom said with a laugh. Carol stopped at her house and tried to use her key. "What the hell?" she said to herself, before noticing it was a new lock. Damn him, she opened her cell and tried Dan's number again. Like before, it went to voicemail, so she left him another message. "Everything's now done and in place," I thought to myself as I looked at my checklist. "Now, all I can do is wait." Carol was at Dan's office Wednesday morning. My credit cards won't work, and when I went to pick up my prescription on the way to work, they told me I no longer had insurance. Do you hate me that much, Dan? "Just covering my bases, Carol. Remember, you walked out on me. I'll pay for all the household expenses, Andy, but you will have to take care of your own from now on. That way, we won't have any financial issues to argue over." "Dan, you're letting this get totally out of control," Carol now shouted. "I just needed a little time to myself, that's all." Leaning over my desk, I said in my most serious and deadpan tone, "Carol, do you see the word stupid tattooed across my forehead? I may not be the most savvy guy in the world, but I wasn't born yesterday. Karin has got your head so turned around. You can't seem to find your arse with both hands. You can't seem to find your arse with both hands. You think you can go out and act like you're single again without any consequences. Think again. The first time I find out you've broken your marital vows, we're done. Shit, you've probably already done it, so I don't even know why we're having this conversation right now. I'm so angry at you right now, I can't see straight, so I think it would be best if you just leave, so I don't say anything that will put what's left of our marriage in the toilet." With that, I sat down. Carol was shocked and got angry herself. "You can't dictate to me like I'm a little child. I'm an equal partner in this marriage, so screw you," she spat at me. "Well, that hasn't happened much in the last 6 months either. But I suppose you're getting all you can handle now on the side anyway," I said, just loud enough so Carol could hear. With that, she turned tail and walked out. I knew that she hadn't done anything yet, but had been close. You see, I had started to have her followed on Wednesdays about a month ago. There was a lot of pecks and handplay, but that's all the further it had gone. I knew she would be tempted, living with Karin, so I wanted to make sure that Carol understood exactly what would happen if she cheated on me, but my life was unraveling. The first 2 weeks were tough. Carol made it a point to visit Andy, but never said more than 2 words to me. I still had her followed, but not much new happened. She was still going out with Karin and her friends, but instead of just Wednesdays, she was out at least 4 nights a week. "Looks like someone is trying to make up for lost time," I said to myself, looking at the report. I did, however, find a nanny of sorts to take care of Andy, a girl just out of college who couldn't find a job. Beth was 23, blonde, about 5'9", and had a slight build. She'd gotten her degree, but could find only part-time work, so when she saw my ad for a nanny, she jumped at the chance. Beth had come from a large family and knew how to take care of and handle young boys. She had 2 younger brothers. So we came to an agreement on pay and hours, and she moved in the following day. Beth worked as a waitress at a mid-priced family restaurant on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday evenings. The other nights we all ate together. After a few weeks, Andy became very at ease with Beth, especially when she read to him before bed. Beth, I really appreciate you going the extra mile with Andy. With his mother out of the picture, for the moment, he needs all the stability in his life I can give him, I said with the best smile I could muster. I know about you and your wife. Your mother filled me in on all the details in case Carol came over and tried to grab him, Beth told me. I just can't believe she'd just walk out on you like that. I've only known you for a short time, but you are one of the most caring men I've ever met, and I can see you love Andy to death. I guess Carol got confused at what was really important and let others convince her that the grass was greener on the other side of the fence, I replied. Well, it'll be over one way or in another 40 days, and it can't come too soon for me. Little did I know, my life would take a major shift, and that shit would hit the fan in less than a week. You see, I am a silent partner in the accounting firm I work for. I've brought in so much new business. Over the last 2 years, the owners made me a 15% partner. I asked that it be kept secret because I didn't want to be known as one of the owners. In that way, I could find out what the employees really thought of the company and how it was being run. My latest accomplishment was a meeting with an overseas garment manufacturer, which had plants in 5 Asian countries. I had met the owners at a party about a year ago and thrown a few of my ideas their way. They were impressed, so much so, we met the following week to talk about our firm taking them on. Dan, I like the way your firm operates. You seem to go beyond the norm and put a personal touch to everything you do, one of the prospective owners told him. Each plant right now operates independently, so I need someone to set up the same system in each facility, so we can run them all from one overseas office. They weren't happy that I wouldn't be handling the overseas operation myself, but I convinced them that I would monitor everything that was going on myself so that there would be no slip-ups. With a signed contract and a handshake, the party began. We had been working on this account for 9 months, and I would have loved to come home to Carol with my good news. I would have loved to have taken her out to the best restaurant, brought her home, and ravished her body, but when I got home, the house was empty, and so was his heart. Beth came in with Andy 20 minutes later with Chinese takeout. I was busting at the seams and had to tell someone my great news, so I told Beth. Forget dinner. We're all going out tonight and celebrate, I told her. Put on your finest, because we're going out in style. My bosses had made reservations at the best restaurant in town for 8-0, and were sending a limo around to pick us up at 7:30, so we had to hurry. I shaved, showered, and got dressed. I told Beth that I would get Andy ready so she would have more time. By 7:15, Andy and I were both dressed and ready to go. That's when I saw Beth descend the stairs. I hope you don't mind. I didn't have anything fancy, so I found one of your wife's dresses that kind of fit, she explained to me. She was right, it kind of fit. It fit her like a silk glove, but was a little short since she was a lot taller than Carol. Do you think it looks okay? You look great, Beth, I said with my mouth hanging wide open. As the bell rang, the 3 of us were led into the back of the limousine, just as Carol was driving down our street. What the hell is all she could say as she saw them all pile into the stretch limo. I wonder what's going on, she thought as she turned her car around to follow them. She then watched them get out and go into the restaurant. That bastard! bastard, he'll take them out to the best place in town, and when I wanted to go before, he said couldn't afford it. She steamed. And who in the hell was the girl wearing my dress? We all had a wonderful night. I was the guest of honor, and we ate and drank our fill. It was Beth who told me it was time to leave, as Andy was getting tired, because it was way past his bedtime. "You're right. We'd better leave, or we'll never get him up in the morning for school." I thanked everyone for the dinner, but as they shook my hand, they were looking past me to Beth, and not only the men. Beth looked hot tonight, and all the women looked jealously at her. They'd all heard the story of Carol's leaving to find herself, and it looks like Dan wasted no time in replacing her. They chuckled to themselves. It was a quiet ride home, as Andy fell asleep as soon as we got in the limo. I carried him upstairs, undressed him, and put him into bed with a kiss on the forehead goodnight. I walked downstairs, still in my tux, and found Beth enjoying a glass of wine at the kitchen table. "I want to thank you for tonight. You didn't have to take me, you know," she told me with a smile. "How could I have left you here alone tonight? And besides, I really enjoy your company, Beth," I said, pouring myself a glass of wine. "I hope it wasn't too boring for you tonight, sitting around with a bunch of accountants." "Quite the contrary. I never knew your job was so interesting, and all the people seem to really like you, including myself," she said with a little smile. "You make me feel like part of your family, even though I'm just the nanny." Be still, my heart, and God damn it, I wish my hard-on wasn't so apparent, I thought as I hid my erection from Beth. It had been a while since I had made real love to a woman. The last few times with Carol were disappointing, as she had just gone through the motions. I would love to take Beth to my bedroom, but I also knew I was still married, and I would remain true to Carol no matter what. Tonight was magical, and my mind is reeling with things I'd like to be doing right now, but they're not going to happen tonight, much to my dismay, I told her. Maybe if things were different, but they're not, so with that, I need to take a cold shower and go to sleep. I told Beth, kissing her on the cheek as she gave me a hug. It was 2 a.m. when I felt Beth climb into my bed next to me. By the heat she generated, I could tell she was naked. I started to say something, but she put her finger to my lips. "I know we can't do anything tonight. I just want to be close to you, that's all," she said as she spooned me. I woke up alone the next morning. I found Beth downstairs, dressed, cooking breakfast for the 3 of us. Nothing was said. Carol was pissed. "Here I am, trying to figure out what I want in my life with Dan, and he has already tossed me to the curb and found some slut," she said, slamming her hand on the desk. She had made the mistake of mentioning it to Karin, who told her that all husbands cheat on their wives, and that tonight they should go out and celebrate her newfound freedom. She didn't feel like going out and partying tonight, and really wanted to talk to Dan, but he was always in some damn meeting. How can one person be so damn busy? Carol and the group met at Tony's again, and it was packed as usual. After a couple of drinks, most of their group headed for home, but not Carol and Karin. A couple of good-looking guys were trying to stake their claim, and Karin was already making out with one of them. The other guy had her on the dance floor, and when a slow dance started, she melted into his arms. His warm hands were all over her body, as Carol felt herself slowly succumbing to his advances. She hadn't been with a man in a long time, and this guy was great-looking, had the body of a Greek god, and wanted her as much as she wanted him. She never stopped him when he kissed her as they danced. She never stopped him as he steered her over to the corner of the dance floor and up against the wall. She, however, should have stopped him when he put his hands into her dress and fondled her breasts and pushed her thong aside to feel her pussy. Yes, she should have stopped him, especially because the private dick Dan had hired was getting it all on tape. The 4 of them had gone back to Karin's place, and even though Carol was now naked, lying on the bed with him, she finally came to her senses. I just can't do it," she told him. "I'm still married, and no matter what I still love my husband. she told him above his objections. So he left her alone, and Carol took one of 2 cold showers that night, one right after he got out of her bed, and the other after she masturbated herself to 2 climaxes. "I've got to get my head and ass wired together," she told herself the next morning. But things beyond her control had started changing her life, and not for the better. On my computer screen, I saw the pictures of Carol, the final one being the 4 of them entering Karin's apartment. I.e., mailed them to my attorney and told him to get the paperwork together, but to hold it until Monday. "I guess she's finally made up her mind," I said sadly, because I had really wanted to get back together with Carol, but no longer. "I'm going to handle the Asian project myself," I told my bosses the next day. "I need to get away, and this will give me the time to clear my head and get my life back in order," I told them. "Dan, everything is set for startup on the 12th, which is a week from next Tuesday. Can you be ready to leave by then?" they asked. "Give me 2 days to get my affairs in order and set up with an apartment, so I'll have a place to send my things," I told them. "I've got to talk to 2 more people today, and if everything goes according to plan, I'll be ready." That afternoon, I set up my staff to handle all my unfinished projects. I drafted paperwork to give my mother my power of attorney and told Keith to serve papers on Carol the following Monday. I would be safely in the air while she was being served. The same amount of notice that she gave me, I said sadly. That night I went home to a house that wouldn't be mine when I returned from overseas, and felt really sad. Carol and I had picked it out together, and there were so many good memories associated with it, and now they would all be gone. I was unusually quiet at dinner, and Beth thought it was something she'd done. No, it's just that I've got a lot on my mind. We'll talk after Andy goes to bed, I told her. By 10:00, the house was quiet as the 2 of us stared at each other. Beth spoke first. "What's the matter, Dan? If it's about the other night, I'm really sorry, and it won't happen again, I promise," she told me. "Beth, it's not that. Remember that party the company threw me a couple of weeks ago? Well, I've decided to do the overseas work myself, and Andy and I'll be leaving early Monday morning," I told her. "And I have an important question to ask you," I started to say, as I now saw Beth starting to cry. "Do you want to go with us?" She went from teary-eyed to all smiles. "Hell yes," she told me as she ran into my arms. "Do you have an updated passport, Beth?" I asked. "I had it updated last year, when I went on a cruise with my college friends," she told me. "Well, then it's all set. You will need to have everything packed up by Saturday, because they're shipping out all our stuff ahead of time. Leave just enough clothes for the rest of the weekend, and Monday's travel clothes. You can tell your family and friends, but I don't want Carol to know until we're in the air. I'm not sure if it's totally legal to just take Andy with us and leave, but I'm doing it anyway. I'll answer all the questions when we get back," I told her. That night, I got with my mother and explained everything to her, including giving her my power of attorney. "Shit will probably hit the fan Monday afternoon with Carol, but I still want you to put the house up for sale next week. Keith will send you a copy of the papers. I'm sending to Carol, and if she has any questions, just tell her to talk to Keith." "You sure this is what you want, Dan? You don't want to try and straighten it out with her?" my mom asked. "She's made her bed, and now she can sleep in it with whomever she wishes," I told her. "You're taking Beth with you," she said, trying to get the final piece out of her son. "I'm not sure where we're headed, but she makes me smile and keeps me sane. Other than that, I may have some real feelings for her, and that's all I'm going to say about it. We will be over Sunday night, so you can say goodbye to Andy," I told her. Monday, Carol was trying to get Dan on the phone when his work told her that he was on a special outside project, but would pass the message on to him. Now, what the hell was he doing? She thought as she tried his cell phone to no avail. "Carol Spencer?" the man asked. She nodded. "You have been served," he said, handing her the envelope. "Now what?" she said as she ripped into the envelope. There was a brief note from Dan stating that I guess I'd made my decision. Hope you have a great life, is how he ended it. And then she saw the pictures. Oh shit, is all she could say. How in the hell did he get those pictures? She thought. The son of a bitch must have had me followed, she said as she flipped through them. Not the kind of pictures you'd like to see of your wife with another man. But I never slept with him. I've got to make him understand that, she said to herself. Gone? What do you mean gone? Was her reply. Dan is on a 4 to 5 month project overseas. He left with Andy Monday morning, Dan's mother told Carol. He can't take Andy away from me, especially out of the country, she shouted. I'll take him to court. I'll see he's thrown in jail, she yelled. Carol, Dan has full custody of Andy, remember? You gave up that right when you left to find yourself, she reminded her. To say you screwed up royally would be a gross understatement. You had a great marriage, but I guess you wanted more. Now you've got nothing, Dan's mother told her. I have to talk to him and explain that it's not what it looks like, Carol said, sobbing. I still love him and never went to bed with anyone else. He's got to believe that. Carol, I saw the pictures, and if my husband was alive and was doing what you were doing, I'd divorce his ass too. If I were you, I'd write him a letter and explain what you need to, and I'll make sure he gets it. In the meantime, I'd get a lawyer. Carol did a good job stating her case. In that alcohol had played a major part, and that she'd stopped it and hadn't gone all the way with anyone since she left. Carol said that she still loved me and would wait for me to come home to her. Dan's reply was short and to the point. Carol, you haven't been a wife to me since you lost all that weight last year. It was like you were now too good for me. You ate up the attention of all the men and made me feel like I was being used on Wednesday nights. When you finally decided to come home to me, you were all hot and bothered, and all you wanted was a good fuck, not to make love to your husband. I guess I no longer turned you on. So now, you and Karin are free to screw whomever you want. I told you Karin would eventually break us up, but you knew better. Yeah, right. Andy, Beth, and I are building a new life based on love and trust. You can see Andy anytime you want. Just get a camera modem for your computer, and I'll set it up. Sign the papers, because Mom is putting the house up for sale this week. There isn't a chance in hell that we'll ever get back together, so don't hold out hope I'll change my mind. I hope you finally got what you were looking for, Carol, and are happy. I never wanted this to happen. Carol knew Dan was right. She'd been a stupid idiot for listening to all her good friends who knew what they were talking about. I guess that's why they were all divorced. She was going to fight it until she got Dan's letter and finally signed the papers. The irony was that 6 months later, Carol was back to the £175 she'd started with 2 years earlier, but no longer had Dan. I was happy though. The work was a little tough because of the language barrier, but I worked through that. Andy was picking up a word here and there and managed to communicate quite well with all the kids he played with. Beth took care of Andy and set up the agenda for our free time. Places to see, things to do is how she phrased it. I still remember that night months ago. It was just after we arrived in the country, and we were all a little stressed. Andy fought going to bed. My program wasn't going as smoothly as it should, and Beth felt a little overwhelmed. She went into the den and kissed the back of my neck, which brought a smile to my face. She reached down, took me by the hand, and led me into their bedroom. It had one candle on each side of our bed. We undressed each other and slipped into bed. Let's just say heaven and earth became one that night. We had tender, loving sex for the first time. Over the next few months, we did everything the other one wanted, unless it involved pain or some type of farm animal. We were more than happy. 5 months later, my mom met us at the airport. She was happy to see us all, especially Andy. On the way home, she kept glancing over at Beth, who seemed to have this content look on her face. "How far along are you?" she asked her. Beth seemed a little taken aback. 3 months. How did you know I'm barely showing? She replied. You two just looked way too happy, like the cat that ate the canary, she told us. 2 weeks later, we were married, and Rhonda was born 6 months later. When Beth said she wanted to join a gym to get rid of her baby weight, I looked like I had seen a ghost. 2 days later, I sprung the news that I had hired her a personal trainer and that she would be supplying all the equipment. No use going through all that shit a second time, I thought to myself. That's the end of this story. If you found it engaging, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this.